so much for joining us for another episode of our Uncovering Possibilities podcast series with the Texas Career Engagement Office. I'm joined by Dr. Cynthia Johnston Turner, Dean of the Faculty of the School of Music at Wilfrid Laurier University. Thanks so much for being with us.
I'm delighted to be here.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm Dean in the Faculty of Music at Wilfrid Laurier University, Waterloo, Ontario, Canada. A short time ago, I was director of bands at the University of Georgia, Go Dogs. Before that, I was director of wind ensembles at Cornell University in Ithaca, New York, where I first met you. I did that for 10 years and I got tenure there. And before that, I was doing my doctorate at the Eastman School of Music, where I started out as a PhD in music ed and then switched over to a DMA in conducting. Before that, I was doing a master's in music education, leadership and conducting at the University of Victoria, British Columbia. And before that, I was a high school music educator in Dundas, Ontario, which is outside of Toronto, for about 10 years.
So tell me, how would you define what you currently do, your current work?
What does a dean do? I've criticized leadership, educational leadership, my entire career. So here I am in that position, which is partly why I took it, because it's very easy to be a Monday morning quarterback. It's hard. It's fun. It's visionary. It's cool to develop a shared vision of where a place needs to go. I miss daily interaction with students. My fellow deans are incredible. All of them are smarter than I am. So that's amazing to be surrounded by people who are smarter than I am. It's a difficult job in terms of how I like to work, which is fast. And let's go, let's get this done. It's obvious what we need to do. Why are you not seeing this? So that part is frustrating because universities move slowly. The private sector makes fun of us for that. But and also there's the added dimension of a union, which is necessary, but handcuffs leadership in a lot of ways to move forward in innovative directions.
So if you're at 10,000 feet and faculty are at 5,000 feet and grad students are at 2,500 feet, what sorts of guidance and advice would you give folks that are, I don't want to say boots on the ground, but those folks that are actually interacting with undergraduate students or faculty that are interacting with graduate and undergraduate students? What advice and guidance do you feel like you can give them now that you've stepped into this role, having previously done that for quite a bit of time at Cornell and at the University of Georgia?
Yeah, that's an interesting way to describe it in terms of a hierarchy. And you're like literally saying this, and in many ways, I think faculty, at least innovative faculty, interesting faculty who don't accept always that the way to teach is the way they were taught, are ahead of the game, in terms of we need to do this, we need to explore ungrading, we need to move in this direction. Why don't we have an AI room? Like a lot of faculty are very are soaring above administration and leadership in a lot of ways. Not all, but some. And graduate students, of course, are coming in eyes wide open, experienced in a lot of ways that faculty are not. I mean, you, for example, pushed me in directions at Cornell and certainly at UGA that I wouldn't have gone if it weren't for you in terms of Google Glass or any other kind of state-of-the-art tech, innovation. So advice, listen, and pay attention. And those are obviously related, but listen to colleagues, to students, to staff. You left staff out of that equation who are often left out, and that's actually a problem in higher education, in my opinion. But also pay attention to politics, as scary as that is. Pay attention to tech. Pay attention to arts and culture and how those two things may or may not be intersecting. Pay attention to how the world is changing and get out in front of it. Don't react. Be proactive as much as possible.
So what are the big questions that you're wrestling with throughout the arts in 2023 and what excites you and what frustrates you?
I think ChatGPT is a big question for higher ed, arts, politics, academic integrity, the future of learning. I think I was going to say it's coming. It's here, but I think it's a big question that because universities, at least the university I'm at now, and all of the universities I've worked at, are so entranced with minutia, you can't help it. It's just, there's just there's so much to deal with that we often aren't contemplating these questions. Forgive me, we are contemplating these questions, but we don't know how to deal with them because we're so mired in minutia. So AI right now is the big sexy thing, and I think it's the sexy scary thing, but I also think it's very exciting. I will say that I am old enough to remember when the calculator came into the math classroom. I was teaching at high school, and everybody's like, oh no, the calculator, is going to ruin the curriculum. Well, no, we just changed the curriculum, and we changed how students thought about problems, and we used the calculator in very interesting ways. I think the same could be said with AI and ChatGPT. I don't know how to change the music curriculum yet with AI, except that when we are creating new buildings, which we are, I would like an AI room. Thank you very much. And what does that look like, and how do we equip it so that we can actually interact with people in Malaysia, in Finland?
Looking at the ChatGPT thing in particular, it seems like probably AI is going to influence composition if it hasn't already, just in terms of putting the notes on the page and then printing them out and giving them to players. What do you think? What would you say to folks that are scared by that? That question their own relevance or question their craft or things of that nature.
This is an excellent question. This is a big question. The only appropriate answer, I think, is I don't know. But what makes music uniquely human and complicated, which we have really yet to define, might be the key to using AI in a way that helps us figure that out. And I know that that's a really unsatisfactory answer. It's just that I think that if we can use AI in a way that makes whatever we do artistically or logistically easier, so that we can concentrate on the things that make us uniquely human, uniquely artists, uniquely unique. Is that even a phrase? I don't know. Then I think that might be interesting.
This conversation is a great example of talking about and addressing bigger questions, but you're undoubtedly busy between all of your obligations, all of the minutiae that you're dealing with at your job, and then of course all of your guest teaching that you're doing throughout the United States and the world. So how do you possibly balance having time and space to consider these big questions, and I'm sure try to form and foster relationships with colleagues that you can then wrestle with some of these things while not drowning in hundreds of emails and other obligations?
Well, isn't that what weekends are for? I mean, I find that there are certain times during the day, certain times during the week, where I am so completely energized by something I've read, a conversation I've had with a faculty member, conversation I've had with a grad student or an undergrad student, that takes my head in a direction away from email or minutia to a really wonderful place. I'm also finding, this is going to sound bizarre, like, do I dare say it? I have lately been finding that when I pay attention to an idea, a big idea, a problem, a vision that I or someone or we have had collectively in a meeting, I will find that an email I will get, an article I will read, another conversation I have with a faculty or a staff member fuels that question. And I don't know whether it's because I've opened myself up to receiving that information, or the universe is working in a weird way that I don't understand. I know this sounds bizarre, but as soon as I open myself up to a problem, a challenge, a vision, an idea, things will come to me or us in ways that fuel that idea or answer that question or is a potential answer to that question. It's weird. And it's not because pot is legal in Canada. I do not partake, but I realize as I'm saying this, it's like, yeah, that sounds really esoteric. I feel like if you open your mind and your heart to ideas and looking for answers for those ideas, things arrive. It's cool. There's a zillion emails that are like, really? Can you not handle this yourself?
So in addition to thinking about and working with AI, do you have any other big projects that you're thinking about at that 100,000 foot view or however it is?
Relevance. I've always wrestled with that. You and I have had conversations about this before. I look from a distance and with some sort of sentimentality and a fair bit of envy at the recent CBDNA, College Band Directors National Association Conference in Georgia, and I look and I heard some of those performances, and they're off the charts, amazing. And I see how they touch people and how there is a flurry of beauty on social media about it. And I can only imagine the live music experience at that time. But I can't help but go, okay, so what? You know, for whom, why? What is the influence on the broader community, whatever that might mean to you in terms of community? How does this performance of X piece of music by X college ensemble affect the future? I don't know. So I realized as I was looking from afar that this is it's a thing in kind of a bubble. It's an important bubble. It's a valuable bubble. It's a bubble that means a lot of things to a lot of people, including me, but it's a bubble. And I'm interested more in breaking through that to see what can happen if we move out of that bubble. And there are little things that we do. We do performances in prisons. We think about what the ripple effect, now I'm mixing my metaphors now, but with the ripple effect of what those concerts can mean for music education students, for high school students in Georgia that came to attend some of those concerts and what that might mean for the future of music education. Sure, of course, but I just have big questions and queries about what it all means in terms of who we're affecting and why.
Do you think the best way to address things along those lines is to approach it from this interdisciplinary lens?
It's very hip right now, and maybe. I'm all about de-siloing the university and de-siloing the music school, for example. I mean, what happens in theory class and what happens in the wind ensemble rehearsal, ne'er the twain shall meet. For goodness sake, what happens in music education classes and what often happens in wind ensemble rehearsals don't even, like, hello? I think interdisciplinary research, interdisciplinary ways of thinking and ways of questioning are extremely important to break through, of course, break through bubbles and break through silos of learning, silos of teaching, and silos of performance. You know, whether that performance be research or teaching or what happens on a stage or in a museum, etc. So yeah, I just think the how of it is hard. Not impossible, certainly, but hard.
Following up on that, there's this idea of like abundance mindset and scarcity mindset. And I think that it's possible to listen to what you're saying. And, if your goal is to be the next Yo-Yo Ma or the next Julian Bliss or whomever, one could listen to that and think these interdisciplinary elements or these big questions or whatever, thinking about it, following up on them, pursuing those projects are limit the time that it takes me to work on my scales or work on this or work on my technique or have lessons or practice or whatever the case is. So what do you tell that person? Is it, this is just where we're going and we have to get used to it? Or if you want to be relevant, that's where you're at? Folks that really want to pursue the craft that they have known for a long time and potentially are not interested in pushing the envelope. And maybe you work with people that are along those lines, or I know that you certainly may have in the past. What do you say to those folks?
You got to be good. there's no substitute for being good. You have to get good. And if that means that you're 4 hours to 6 hours in a practice room working on getting good, training your weaknesses, figuring out how you can be the best snare drum, clarinet, saxophone conductor, artist, whatever you can be, you can't not do that, right? There's no substitute for that. I don't think. You still have to be extremely hardworking, extremely disciplined, and you have to put in the time to get excellent. Also, you have to get out of the practice room, get out of the museum, get out of your own head, get out of the music school, get out of, wherever it is you're doing that thing to get excellent, and understand how that pursuit of excellence, and note I say excellence and not perfection, that pursuit of excellence might intersect with somebody else's pursuit of excellence. That's like super exciting, I think. And yeah, it takes time, but everything takes time.
So tell me, what excites you about the present and the future of the arts?
I think that the arts in general, I will talk about music in a second, I think, but I think that the arts in general have been on the forefront of cultural discourse, and that has not changed. It's maybe changed in Florida. Sorry, I had to say Florida. You can edit that out, but I do worry about Florida. But I think that, they're censoring books. They're banning books. I have issues with that. I have issues with copyright infringement. But anyway, I think generally speaking, the arts have been extremely important, if not the most important thing for cultural forwardness and cultural questions. I think music has been the least good at that and the least on the front end of that. I think the visual arts, I think the poetry and literature have been, and even dance have been more on the forefront of that. Drama and music tends to follow, but I think generally speaking, the arts really speak to who we are as humans and who we are as humans in a society. And they push those questions forward to us. So that has always excited me about the arts and continues to excite me about the arts. I have a t-shirt that it's an alien smoking a cigarette and says, "But is it art?" I love that question, right? I love those, I don't know, is it? What defines that, and who defines that, and who has defined that in the past, and who is defining it now as we decolonize our curriculum and decolonize the arts. Nothing actually frustrates me about the arts per se. The arts in higher education or the arts in systems that are governed can be frustrating because we have boards and we have people that fund us that can define what we do or don't do, and that can be frustrating.
Do you think that the 21st century musician should feel comfortable having their career or knowing that they could have a career in academia and that could sustain them throughout their entire career? Or do you think that folks that are stepping into these positions now or want to, undergraduates pursuing graduate school, graduate students pursuing employment or postdocs, do you think that they need to be looking into more of a portfolio career or into something different than they've probably seen their teachers, advisors, and mentors do?
The latter. I don't know. I've read a lot of articles lately that tenure is disappearing. I don't know if that's true or will be true. There's so many aspects to this question, Tyler. I think that there are lots of people that don't want to be tenured, literally tied to a career. I give an example of a search that we just did for an Indigenous scholar in music, and we came to the conclusion when we had how many applicants? 0. That there are a lot of very successful Indigenous artists that have no first of all, what is tenure? What is tenure at Wilfrid Laurier University, the 7th Prime Minister of Canada, who was actually quoted as saying, "How do we get rid of the Indians?" That don't want to be tied down to a university because they have an amazing career. So there's that part of your question. The way that many of our current graduate students and undergraduate students have been taught may not be the way of the future, in that you have a studio, you have X amount of students in your studio, you teach those students, you give studio classes, you bring in some artists from another university to which you also hope that you get an invitation because that's how you get tenure. That whole concept may be disappearing in 15 to 25 years. I don't know. I think universities in general are looking at tenure as being very expensive. They're looking at it from a performance management lens. For example, you may or may not know that we just posted 3 musician in residence. They're essentially full-time positions. It's a 3 to 5 year contract. If you're doing very well, if your teaching is terrific, if you're recruiting, if you have a full studio or close to a full studio and things are going well, we will renew your contract. If not, we will not renew your contract. I wrote a paper early on in my career on the evils of tenure until I got tenure at Cornell. And then they're like, don't come for my tenure. But in my case, I remember when I got tenure at Cornell, I felt absolutely obliged to do even more, to do even better, to what's the next thing I'm going to do? What's the next research? What's the next tour? What's the next thing that the wind ensemble can do? I felt absolutely, oh my gosh, that they trust me with this thing. And now what do I do? I just felt that way. But I know there were professors at Cornell that maybe came to work on Mondays.
So, what skills, artistic and otherwise, do you cultivate throughout your day that best support your work?
I try to practice every day, meaning I will either do the clapping app or I will do the Intune app. Like, I'll just try to train my ears every day. I try to read and I try to work out every day. I tried meditating. I tried to do that and I can't do it. I don't know why, but I just can't do it. And I think actually my meditation is actually going for a run, because I do a lot of visioning and thinking, and I'll have my phone with me and I'll have amazing ideas or they're stupid ideas, but I still say them out loud. So being physically active and training, I've signed up for a half marathon again. So that concept of I don't train properly unless I've signed up for a race is really important. So that helps me think about vision statements, mission statements. What are we working toward?
So this content series is called Uncovering Possibilities. So it's really designed for graduate students and postdocs who are just considering work in academia, but also potentially possibilities that exist outside of academia or alt-ac opportunities. Do you have any parting advice or words for folks that are tuning in and listening to this content right now?
Graduate students and postgraduate students who land a job in academia, good for you, fantastic. If it's tenure track, good for you, fantastic. If you get tenure, you're awesome. For the majority of graduate students and postdocs who don't land that gig, you have to be open to a portfolio career and a gig economy, and understanding, in the case of music, the music industry and how that can work for you. I think you have to be willing to move. The job may be in the other side of the country, maybe in another country, maybe across an ocean, and you have to consider that. I'm looking at CVs right now, and the most exciting CVs that I'm looking at are folks that have been out of their comfort zone in some way. I'm looking at a CV where someone has done a Bachelor of Music and Piano Performance. They did a Master of Music and Piano Performance somewhere very different. Then they did a postdoc in leadership studies across the ocean. And they've done this amazing thing. Now they've come back to Canada in this particular case and are carving out a career that's has music in it in a very important way, but is also affecting change in a global way. Like, it's extraordinary. And those CVs are coming across my desk more and more. So I think traditionally, in the case of music, we've done a Bachelor of Music here, we've done a Master of Music here, elsewhere, hopefully, maybe not. We've done some kind of doctorate here, and then we hope that we land a postdoc or a tenure track position here in the same country. I'm seeing more and more CVs that don't look like that and are very exciting. And we're starting in the case of Laurier to put together job ads that actually welcome that career and don't welcome the other career. You've done a bachelor, master's, and DMA in the course of X amount of years, maybe a couple of years of teaching in between. That's not very interesting anymore. We need you to build this studio, but we also need you to talk to us about AI. We need you to teach in this music industry certificate. And we need you to help us decolonize the curriculum by bringing Indigenous ways of knowing or your Black scholarship into this conversation. So that kind of breadth, part of this conversation has been interdisciplinary knowledge, is way more interesting to me, at least in this leadership position, and more universities than somebody who's done it the way their teacher did it. Because universities are changing. The economy's changing, politics are changing, the world's changing, and we need people to be out of their comfort zone with more experiences.
Thank you so much for joining me.
I hope it was helpful.